Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Thus was the fate of the 6 wives of King Henry VIII, respectively, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr. King Henry VIII, charismatic and extravagant, his reign lasted nearly 39 years, during the beginning of the English Renaissance and Protestant Reformation. But it's the monarch's chaotic love life rather than his politics that have kept him in the spotlight. Henry VIII didn't just have 6 wives but several mistresses as well. His desperate desire for a male heir led him to divorce 2 wives and have 2 wives beheaded. It led to religious revolution and the creation of the Church of England, the dissolution of the monasteries, and the Reformation. Henry's 6 wives are the subject of much fascination and speculation that continues to this day. Catchy as the rhyme is, it leaves more than a few questions unanswered, and in this episode, we'll be looking into the lives and the untimely demise of these famous women. Catherine of Aragon. Henry VIII's longest marriage was to Catherine of Aragon, daughter of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, and best known today for her role in sparking the king's excommunication from the Catholic Church and the Reformation. 8 years before her marriage to Henry in 1509, Catherine was married to Henry's elder brother Arthur, who died of sickness at just 15 years old. Together, Henry and Catherine had a daughter, Mary Tudor, but Henry wanted a son. Frustrated at Catherine's perceived inability to produce a male heir, and now in love with one of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting, Elizabeth Bessie Blount, Henry declared their marriage nullified. In 1519, Bessie was taken in secret to a Essex countryside, where she gave birth to Henry Fitzroy, Henry's only acknowledged illegitimate child. By the 1520s, Henry had developed a fondness for Anne Boleyn, another lady-in-waiting to the Queen, and eventually sought the Pope's approval for an annulment. So Henry claimed that since his wife had previously married his brother, the marriage was invalid. Catherine vigorously contested this charge, explaining that the marriage was never consummated. When the Pope refused the annulment, Henry VIII officially started his own church, the Church of England. Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn became the subject of Henry's affection after he had an affair with her sister Mary. While still legally married to Catherine, Henry began showing his esteem for Anne, openly honoring her in his court and granting her the title Marchioness of Pembroke in September 1532. But Anne had no interest in being a mistress and steadfastly refused the king's advances until she received a marriage proposal, and the couple married in secret in early 1533. She was crowned Queen of England, and they had a daughter, the future Elizabeth I. Henry remained hopeful Anne would give him a son, but after a series of stillborn births, Henry lost interest in this wife of his. Nonetheless, Anne remained in a position of relative power. When he took a mistress, Anne became enraged. On one occasion, her sister-in-law, Lady Rochford, was banished from court when she and Anne had plotted to remove an unnamed mistress from court. On the other hand, Henry had a naturally jealous and suspicious character and was persuaded by an advisor that Anne was unfaithful. Many historians believe Henry fabricated the charges against Anne. Following accusations of adultery and treason based on little evidence, Anne was arrested and beheaded. Jane Seymour. In May 1536, days after Anne's execution, Henry married his 3rd wife. Anne Boleyn's and Jane Seymour's mothers were first cousins, who shared the same grandmother and were raised together for a time. Unlike his previous wives, Jane never had a coronation and so was never crowned queen. In October 1537, Henry finally got his wish, with Jane giving birth to the future King Edward VI. Sadly, Jane died less than 2 weeks after the birth. While opinion is divided as to what caused her death, it is generally assumed that it was a result of a complication from pregnancy. Jane was laid to rest in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Anne of Cleves. Following Jane Seymour's death, Henry spent time in mourning and stayed a bachelor for 2 years, until his chief minister, feeling that England needed a foreign ally against the Catholic Church, suggested that he seek a European alliance and marry one of the sisters of Germany's Duke of Cleves. Hans Holbein the Younger was dispatched to paint a likeness of the two women, and Henry found Anne to be more flattering of the two. However, on Anne's arrival to England, Henry was shocked that Anne looked nothing like the painting, and expressed concerns that Anne was already married. While he was eventually convinced that she was free to marry, and the marriage did take place on January 6, 1540, he was unable to consummate their marriage. Anne, the so-called ugly wife, accepted a divorce and generous settlement 6 months later. She spent the rest of the king's life in England maintaining her own household separate from Henry's. Catherine Howard. Next in line to marry King Henry VIII was Catherine Howard, maid of honor to Anne of Cleves. By the time they married in July 1540, Henry was 49 years old, while Catherine was around 16. Said to be delighted with his new bride, Henry showered Catherine with gifts and called her his rose without a thorn. In less than a year into their marriage, rumors of infidelity surfaced. Catherine was accused of treason for failing to disclose her marital history prior to her marriage with Henry, and for eliciting meeting with another man during the marriage. Just months after being stripped of her title of queen, Henry had Catherine beheaded in February 1542. Catherine Parr. The last and perhaps the luckiest of Henry VIII's wives was Catherine Parr, who he married in July 1543. Catherine proved to be a kind wife who looked after Henry in his sickness and a good stepmother to the king's 3 children. Catherine had many ties to the royal family from a very young age. She was named after Catherine of Aragon, and the Parr family were close to the original royal couple. Her friendship with Mary was how she eventually met Henry. Catherine's evangelical zeal for Protestantism made her many enemies in Henry's court, who tried to turn the king against her. However, she convinced Henry she was loyal to him. Henry trusted her so much that in the event of his death, he named her Queen Regent. When Henry died in 1547, he left provisions of £7,000 a year for Catherine to support herself, and for Catherine to be still in possession of her courtly clothes, jewels, and such. Catherine's final husband was her previous interest and the uncle of the new king, Thomas Seymour. However, their marital bliss was short-lived. For one thing, Thomas caused a public scandal by trying and failing to woo the teenage Princess Elizabeth, who he thought would be a more strategic match for him. Then, after Catherine gave birth to their daughter in late August 1548, she fell ill with fever and died within a week. What do you think? Comment down in the section below and don't forget to like and subscribe.